All right, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to make a batch Apex class. Now, anytime you're dealing with a large batch of records, obviously this is a best practice, and you should know how to write one of these. So we're going to make a really simple example that literally looks at all the leads created within the last week and capitalizes their names just for sort of data quality purposes. Now, again, this is a really simplistic example, but each batchable, schedulable class follows the same sort of structure. And I want to show you what that structure is so that in the future, when you build those batchable classes, you have a framework for how to proceed. So without any further ado, let's get started. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and log into Salesforce. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go to my name and I'm going to open up the developer console. So once I'm in the developer console, I'm going to create a new Apex class and I'm going to call it lead utilities. Now this is going to be a utility class, so I'm going to be able to use it throughout other classes within my system. First, let's just clean up the tabs here. And now let's go ahead and start defining our utility class. I need to make it global so that I can reference it from other classes. And now I need to define my method that I want here. And I'm going to create a global static string that returns me a string called capitalized name. So I'm going to pass it an unformatted string, and then I'm going to capitalize that. So let's go through and write this function. It's pretty simple. I'm just going to use a regex to turn something like John Doe into John Doe that's capitalized properly. So the first thing I'll do is I'll actually split that unformatted name into different parts. And I'm going to use a regex that I found online. And I'm going to kind of explain what it does. So it'll split on a space, on a new line, on a dash, or on a period. And it'll do one or more instances of any of those. So it's going to create me an array of strings. And now what I need to do is basically go ahead and join those arrays together into clean name parts that I've capitalized. So I'll create a new empty list of strings, and for each string within the parts of the name that was entered, what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to send them all to lowercase, and then I'm going to capitalize them. So I know that all of the letters will be lowercase, and then when I capitalize, it just capitalizes the first letter in that string. So we have our clean string, which is lowercase, and then we have the clean cap string, which we take that clean string and we capitalize it. Does that make sense? All right, so now the last thing we have to do is we just need to add that new capitalized clean name to our list, our empty list that we created. And then to return a string from the function, we're just going to join the different clean name parts. So it's a little bit complicated, but if you look through the code, it's actually pretty simple what's going on, and we're just going to join them based on a space. Oh, now it looks like I have a bunch of errors. I think, yeah, it looks like I just forgot a symbol there. So I'll save, and that looks good. Okay, so now I want to test it using my anonymous Apex code tool within the developer console. So I'm going to create two strings called some ugly name and some other ugly name. And I'll make sure that the capitalization is like really weird in those. And then I'm just going to run a system debug. And I'm going to call leadutilities.capitalizeName. And then I'll pass those two weird names. And then I'll just go ahead and execute this code. So now it should open up my logs. And if I check debug only there, I will see that they've been capitalized properly. And they actually look really good. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'll zoom in so it's a little easier to see. It looks like my function's working. So we've built our function. All right, so once we've built our function, now what we want to do is we want to create yet another Apex class. And this time we're actually going to create our batch class. So I'm going to call this one batch capitalized names. And I will go ahead and create it. Now, what I want to do is I want to make it global. And I want to make sure that it implements schedulable and also that it implements database.batchable of sObject. So that means that I can pass it a batch and it'll know how to handle it. Now, all of these follow the same structure, like I mentioned in the introduction. First, we're going to have a start function, and we're going to pass that a batchable context object. And I'm just going to have it return null so that I can continue. Then we're going to have a void function, execute, and again, it needs to be passed a batchable context, as well as a list of sObjects. And I need to define which sObject. So in this case, I'm going to use leads. Then we have a finish function. Again, we pass a batchable context. And I'm going to actually overwrite or overload the execute function to be able to pass it a schedulable context. So basically, I can call either of them, and depending what I pass in the parameters, it'll call a different one. So this is called overloading in Apex, and we'll learn more about this in a future video. But for now, I'm just going to save. So I have my format set up there, and this is the structure. So now I just need to go through and I need to define each of those functions. So the first thing I want to do is I want to write a query. So I'm going to select the ID, the first name, and the last name from lead, where the created date is in the last 7 days. And then I just need to return a query locator object with that query. So that'll generate essentially my batch, my scope. Now within my execute function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a lead or a for loop. And for each lead in my scope, in that list that I'm passing, I'm going to call that lead utilities function that we just defined to capitalize the first name and the last name. And that's it. So now I'm going to make a try catch block, and I'm going to make sure that I always catch my exception and debug it so that I know what's going wrong if something goes wrong. And I'm just going to try and update the scope. And that's it. So the scope again is that list of records. Now my finish function, I don't need anything, so I'll just make a comment there for myself. And now I want to overwrite my execute. Again, if I pass a different parameter, I want to be able to schedule it to execute a batch. So I just need to do database.execute batch, and then I need to pass a new instance of this class, that is new batch capitalized names. All right, so that's all done. Now let's do another quick test to make sure we're doing well. So I have this lead called Prue Abbott, and I'm going to go ahead and change his name so that it's weirdly capitalized. So I'll make sure to put some caps and other caps, and I'll go ahead and save that. All right, so now he's got a weirdly capitalized name, and this is one that we would expect our batch class to clean up. So let's go back into our developer console. Let's again open our execute anonymous window, and let's create a new batch job. So I'm going to do database.execute batch, and I'll create a new instance of that class we just defined. So I'm going to go ahead and execute that, and I didn't receive any errors, so it looks like it worked properly. So what I want to do is I want to go back to my lead. I'm going to just go ahead and refresh this lead. And as you can see, his name has been capitalized. So our utility works well, our batch class works well. Now it's a matter of actually scheduling it. So let's go to our setup, and I'll click on setup, and this will take me to a configuration page. And I'm going to put in classes. And I'm going to open up Apex classes. And from within here, I can click on the button that says schedule Apex. Now I can make a job name. I'll call it capitalized names. And I can choose a specific class. So I'll go into my classes and I'll choose batch capitalized name. And now I just need to figure out my schedule. So I'm just going to run it on Sunday, let's say, and I can choose a start date and an end date. I can run it for a year, 2 years, whatever, and a preferred start time. And I'll save it. And there I have my Apex classes. So now I'm going to go to jobs and I'm going to click on schedule jobs, and I can see my scheduled job there. It's called capitalized names. I can even go in and edit it, edit the schedule. And if I go up to my search again, and I search for jobs again, if I click on Apex jobs, I can see the different ones that are scheduled, and I can see the different ones that have executed and their status. So that's it. All right, so there we have it. We saw how to write a utility class. We saw how to use that utility class within our batch class. And we even saw how to sort of extend our batch class to make it schedulable and how to schedule it from within Salesforce. So hopefully this was useful to you guys. If it was, feel free to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. I make new videos every single week, so consider subscribing if you want to learn more about Salesforce. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.